Well, folks, the legislature is in session and they're getting to work for this year and what will happen all across the state of Oklahoma. And I am joined by a special guest today. See, the Middle Ground that airs Sunday mornings with you is also airing every weekday at 10 a.m. on the radio, 1640 a.m. The Eagle, where you can hear Trent England, who is my co-host today, there every morning with MiddleGround Radio. Trent, thanks so much for being back with us today.
Yeah,
and
my pleasure.
Thanks for joining us on the show. You had me on last week on your first show, and I appreciate you coming back to talk with us today.
That's right. Glad to be here and glad to be kicking off MiddleGround Radio this last week on AM 1640.
Well, let's start with the governor's state of the state. It was last Monday, so just about a week ago, and she identified a couple of priorities. You heard the state of the state. You've been talking with folks all week. Let's set it up for our viewers that may not have caught that moment. Talk to us about the governor's posture this year to start the session.
Well, the governor, governors have their own style, and I think Governor Fallin's style is definitely to take that sort of 30,000-foot approach and define some themes and then leave the details to the legislature. And so in her inaugural address, she talked about three themes, really: education and public health and criminal justice, some prison reforms. And she talked about all those in the state of the state and then added in what I think is really important, especially for the legislature this year, the budget and what she called, I think, performance-informed budgeting. Sometimes people talk about performance-based budgeting, but she really emphasized being wise with taxpayer dollars.
So contrast this for viewers at home maybe with what we've seen in past from governors in other states, or what we're hearing about watching our evening news with other governors that are getting highlighted. Of course, everyone keeps talking about Scott Walker because of Iowa, but what are we seeing from other governors across the country?
Well, you know, the challenge for governors is that it's an office that can either be at odds with the legislature or can work with the legislature. You can provide a lot of sort of momentum going into the process or sort of stand back. And, you know, as I said, I think Governor Fallin seems to be very comfortable allowing the legislature to take the lead and allowing legislative leaders to define the agenda within some themes that she has set out. And, you know, everybody's concerned. There's talk at the Capitol about, you know, potential budget shortfall. People worry about falling oil prices. So much is defined by the factors on the ground. And one thing you see in states right now is state performance, state economies going all sorts of different directions. States like Illinois can't pay their bills. Here in Oklahoma, we have a great economy, but, you know, some concerns, I think, down at the legislature that they have to overcome.
Now, we're going to have on one of the legislative leaders just a little bit later on today to talk with us about maybe the legislature's perspective on the start of session. But I want to go back to this comment you made about the governor working with the legislature. Sometimes they can be at odds. I mean, our viewers at home are probably saying, wait a minute, the governor's Republican, the legislature's overrun with Republicans. I think there may be a few Democrats left in the Senate, right? I mean, but that's the playing field right now. So how is it that there could be tension?
Well, you know, one of the jokes in most legislative bodies is that the enemy isn't the other party, it's the other chamber. You know, if you're in the House, the enemy's the Senate. If you're in the Senate, the enemy's the House. And if you're in the legislature, it may be the governor and vice versa. I mean, everybody has their own agenda, their own issues that they were elected on or that they perceive themselves to have been elected on. And you know, for a governor in her second term, her final term, a lot of the things that may be on her mind are more about legacy than about the details of policy. And I think that, you know, that creates probably some natural friction, maybe some healthy friction with legislators who want to make some changes and really, you know, maybe justify these huge supermajorities that Republicans have won.
So there have been voices that have come out and championed the governor's State of the State address and her approach this session, saying that we need to look at the budget. We need to look at some of these areas. Education needs to be a top priority. There's been others that have said that Oprah Winfrey could have written this budget, right, this State of the State address, and had critiques that said she isn't really leading. She's kind of just throwing some ideas at the board and letting the legislature run the state. Which one is it, and what do you think we're going to see early in session this year?
Well, it is funny. I was just reading earlier today, you know, one person's take that, oh, this is a very solidly conservative speech and direction, especially focused on the criticisms of sort of the state budget and agency spending. And you're absolutely right. A lot of people looked at the speech and said, you know, it does feel like a kind of a hands-off approach. I think that the silver lining on it is the governor certainly has telegraphed to the legislature she's not going to be in the details, right? There are huge openings for people who want to provide leadership and vision, whether they're in the legislature, whether they are in other state agencies, other statewide elected officials. And I think that she has, she has set it up for other folks to step in and take real leadership on some of these key issues that are going to define the future for Oklahoma.
And we're, again, going to have one of those lawmakers on talking about the leadership and vision of the state here in just a minute. Let's break down the governor's priorities, because that may come up in this conversation a little bit. And I want to know what your callers have been saying this week on the radio program, what you've been talking about. Let's break down this concept of educational attainment. That seems to be something getting a lot of press from the governor, and education's on the mind of the legislature. What are the details here?
Well, and this is where you have to go to the details, because educational attainment to some people, that just means let's put more diplomas in the hands of Oklahomans that maybe they can't read, right? And so, there's one side of the argument that sees this as being just about the numbers. Maybe it's about the number of diplomas, maybe it's about the number of dollars. And there is another side, and I think that the legislature, the legislators I've talked to this year, they want to move toward accountability, right? Attainment defined by achievement. And so I think that's where this is going to go. Choice, giving parents choices in education is really, I think everybody today understands that has to be part of the conversation. That has to be part of the agenda in Oklahoma, to bring accountability to schools and to throw a lifeline to students who aren't having their needs met right now.
Yeah, I was reminded when the governor was talking about that phrase, educational attainment, it was on this show just a few weeks ago that Senator Clark Jolly came on and talked about a bill he filed for an education savings account, and he used the phrase education attainment in talking about how we needed to make sure those opportunities were available for all. There's another phrase the governor used that's being discussed, and this is improving health outcomes, and talking about where Oklahoma is. We've talked on the MiddleGround, this show, for quite a bit about how Oklahoma lags in terms of health indicators. What are you hearing on the radio show this week about that topic?
Well, I think a lot of people heard that part of the speech, and you hear kind of echoes of former Arkansas Governor Huckabee. I mean, health is a real concern. The concern is also, though, is it state government's job?
Well, we're going to be right back with a little bit more, and we're going to be talking about what the legislature really has in store over the next coming weeks, as we will have Representative Leslie Osborne from the Mustang area in to talk about her legislative priorities and what bills we might see dealing with the budget. That's coming up next on the MiddleGround.